So thank you, those who have joined for our first virtual workshop for TOBY's 101. Oh, sorry, I have the wrong slide up. Glenn, I forgot to get your picture on this one.
Stop recording.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Well, this is the first of many errors I'm sure on this thing. So I'll introduce myself. So I'm Kelly Lynch. I am on the BOMA OEB board as a vice president. I've been involved in the awards committee for a number of years. Definitely not an expert, but a resource for sure in trying to keep our TOBY program alive here in Oakland, East Bay, and San Francisco. And
okay.
Courtney.
Sure. Courtney Shadle with Cushman & Wakefield, prior chair for the BOMA Oakland East Bay Awards Committee, and now serving on the BOMA San Francisco Awards Committee as just a member, but also a resource. I've entered TOBY's twice, once in the industrial category and once in the under 100,000 square foot category, both times making it to international, but unfortunately, not winning, but you know, maybe in the future. So Glenn, you want to?
Sure. Good morning. It's nice to see everybody virtually, and thank you for allowing me to participate. My name is Glenn Good, and I'm with Tishman Speyer at 333 Bush in San Francisco. On or off, probably for around 16 years, not off, but I've been participating in the TOBY Awards program, whether it be in San Francisco or in Chicago. I managed a building in Chicago where we went to the international competition and lost, and have been a participant out in San Francisco as well. And we've taken 333 Bush to the international competition a couple times and have not been successful, but knock us down 7, we'll get up 8. Looking forward to participating and sharing any insights that I might have, along with some very capable people here, Courtney and Kelly and Karen and Julie and the rest of the team.
Okay, the Outstanding Building of the Year. So this is the mission statement from BOMA International, recognizing excellence in building management, operational efficiency, tenant retention, emergency planning, and community impact. So I think there's a misconception a lot of times that TOBY is a beauty pageant for beautiful buildings, but it is so much more than that. Anybody can enter, and the idea is actually to recognize operations, I think, and it's an award as a property manager to celebrate you being a property manager and how well you run your buildings in all ways. Like, they look at all these different aspects. I think it's always evolving, and it really is and should be celebrated as one of the most prestigious awards you can get in the industry. Courtney?
Sure, yeah, so there are 3 levels to the competition. So we'll start locally here in the Bay Area. BOMA Oakland East Bay and BOMA San Francisco have partnered together to administer the local TOBYs. However, they are, I'm trying to, like, if you're in a competing category and your building is in Oakland and there's another building in San Francisco, at the local level, you will not compete against one another. You'll only compete against your other local buildings. So BOMA San Francisco members compete against BOMA San Francisco members, and BOMA Oakland East Bay compete against BOMA Oakland East Bay. But as far as resources on our committee for judging, for coaching sessions, which we'll talk about later, we have partnered together those 2 BOMA locals to administer the program. And then after the local, so we'll talk later about the scoring process and what that entails in order for you to advance to the regional. But the regional, we are in the Pacific Southwest region. And then Karen actually is the chair for the Pacific Southwest TOBYs. So you'll see emails from her later in the year. Those entries are usually due in March, and then winners are announced in April. And then if you win at the regional level, you automatically advance to international. And this year, international will be in July of 2021 at the BOMA International Conference. And so basically, once you submit for regional, and we'll talk about it more later, it's out of your control. You've done your best work. You just, you know, sit back, relax, and or stress, and hope for the best. So,
and hope that international is live this year too.
Yeah,
we'll see. Okay, a little schedule. So this is sort of the timeline that we're looking at. Is today the 8th even?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Today actually marks the opening for registration for local BOMA, either San Francisco or East Bay. All of the registration is being done through local Oakland East Bay website. There should probably be a link up for San Francisco participants to link you to the website to register in Oakland East Bay. We take turns hosting the part of the registration. So registration currently is open until the end of October. After that, December 18th is your next target date. That is when the local e-submission deadline is, the official close of you submitting for local competition. Then we'll have a judging period where we will judge your online submissions. We will also schedule the in-person part of that, which we'll talk about later. After we pick our winners, the judging period, we will have our gala virtually, more than likely this year, on February 11th. And then after the local winners are announced, we will reach back out to, we being me and Courtney and Glenn, and coordinate reaching out to the local winners and giving feedback on their submissions, your local submission, your e-submissions, so that you have an opportunity to adjust your submissions before they are submitted to the regional level. So this is a great opportunity to tweak your entries, to make them a little better, to add, to fix, all based on our local judging responses and comments from the judging. And then this is when it goes on to Karen. And Karen sort of takes over as the regional lead for the Pacific Southwest region. And the deadline for submissions is March 12th. And then after that, it's the sit back and relax. And winners are usually announced mid-April from the regional, and then you're automatically advanced on to international. This year's international ceremony is scheduled right now to be in Boston, July 21st. So about a year away. Who would like? Yeah. So so every year TOBY International puts out the guidelines for the different categories to submit. They're all found online. There's a link in here. We can definitely share this presentation as well afterwards. That'll take you to a link. This link actually is for the office, but we can share where all of them are at depending what category you're planning to enter in. There are multiple categories, and there are different books based on the different entry requirements based on the categories. But essentially, this is your Bible for entering TOBYs. This is where all the requirements are. This is what you're judged based off of. These are, you know, the things you can put in, all primarily based on your electronic submission. And so, you know, all the different categories that are required, the attachments you can put in, where you need pictures, and whether it's just words, you know, you have a Word document that you enter, and it has everything outlined in this PDF that's found on the BOMA International Awards site. Glenn, would you like to chat about our coaching sessions and what we offer?
Sure. One of the things that I think is really beneficial is the coaching sessions that we offer to buildings that are considering entering the TOBY competition. When I moved here, relocated here from Chicago to San Francisco, this was something that Karen Cowan and her team introduced. And it was really a great opportunity to sit down with the property manager and their team and just really go through the various requirements, and also to give them some suggestions about what is a entry that will be looked very favorably upon, and hopefully a winner. And it's really, if you're humble enough, it's really important that you be humble in the TOBY competition, because if you are, you will get a lot of great suggestions from people who've been involved in the process. You have a lot of people on this panel that have years of experience that can tell you some of the pitfalls, some of the things to avoid, and also, most importantly, some of the things to highlight that you might not think of. There might be something that you and your team did, and and it's just not on the forefront of your mind. And you will have a coaching session with, whether it be myself or whether it be Courtney or Kelly, and they'll say, do you do this or do you do that? Do you have this certification? Do you have this in terms of community involvement or tenant relations? And it gets the creative juices thinking. And I think that's really, really important, because when you go in it, especially if you're a first-time participant, you don't have the really all the understanding of what you can add in there and what you can include. So I think I would encourage it highly. I think it's really a great opportunity to get some great feedback and some input from some really experienced folks.
Thank you. And like Glenn had said, this is a great resource, and not enough people take advantage of it. I'm going to tell you, I only had 2 people take advantage of it last year. So not enough people reach out. So if you have any questions, if you would like to set it up, want to get more information, you can contact Glenn or myself, and we will schedule a time virtually now, probably, to answer any of your questions and provide guidance in any way we can. Okay. Courtney.
Sure. So the basic TOBY entry requirements, these are required for all entrants regardless of category. So you must be a BOMA member in good standing. That just means that you've paid all of your dues to your BOMA local and are a current member. Not have been an international winner within the last 3 years, and that is for any category. And then also, if you are looking to re-enter the same category that your property has previously won a TOBY in, you need to wait at least 5 years before re-entering. And I don't, just looking at the names on the screen, don't believe that any of the people attending today fall within that category, so that's great. Your property must have been at least 50% occupied for 1 full year from date of occupancy of the first tenant by June 15, 2021. So essentially, as of June 15th, 2020, you should be 50% occupied. I know that this year is unique because of COVID, and I think that, if this is a situation that your building falls into, you can reach out to us directly and we can check with BOMA International to verify. But personally, I think it would be reasonable to assume if you were new construction or, under 50% occupied, however, by June of this year, would have been 50% occupied if people were going to work, that it would be like a reasonable assumption to allow you to enter, but we can always cross that bridge if and when we come to it. So, and then Energy Star benchmarking is required. You are not required to be Energy Star certified, just be benchmark, which I know in California, any building over, I think 50,000 square feet is required to benchmark their energy usage. So all of us should have this readily available. And we'll talk about it later too, but one thing this year that is unique because of COVID, the Energy Star benchmarking, your Energy Star score that you use, your statement of energy performance for your submission, can be anytime within the past 24 months. Typically, it would be within the last year if you are entering for the current cycle. However, due to COVID and the occupancy anomalies that we have this year, they are allowing you to use the prior 24 months anytime within there, your statement of energy performance. So, yeah.
Can I say something about that, Courtney?
Of course, yeah.
I think that's where, just to piggyback on what Kelly had introduced about coaching session is the importance of Energy Star benchmarking, but also to understand that it's not the end of the world. A lot of people stress about energy benchmarking because they're like, is it high enough, or do I have a chance against other modern buildings? There's a tiered system now in terms of the judging. And there's a certain level. Hopefully the judges are paying attention to that. But there's a tiered system depending upon your score. So I only encourage you that because that's kind of the input or some of the understanding you might get or feedback you might get from Kelly or myself, because, you know, I've often heard people in the past saying, well, you know, I have a historical building, or, you know, like Julie referred to, maybe she has a historical building that doesn't have air, or, you know, something of that sort. Don't fret over that, because you know, while you want to have the best foot forward on your Energy Star score, BOMA International, in terms of the competition, made that a tiered approach some time ago, so that it's not a be all end all in terms of a killer in that category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, this is the wrong workbook. Sorry. I'm gonna actually, I'll just do this really quick. A lot of times people talk about being BOMA 360 versus TOBY. This is just a little slide that we used to use to sort of tell you if you're one, it's very easy to become the other. There's not much difference in them in any way. So if you're BOMA 360, you're there for TOBYs pretty much. There's just a little bit more information that needs to happen. And then if you win a TOBY, they have this really great program, BOMA International. We'll have to double check if they're doing it. I'm sure that they still would do it. But where essentially to become BOMA 360, all you have to do is submit your application and pay your fees, I believe.
Yeah, so I can speak to that, because last year, so my building in Mountain View was under 100,000 square feet, and I won local and regional. And in order to become a BOMA 360 building, all I had to do was submit the prerequisites for BOMA 360, which I think are the first 5 items listed. Like I'm pointing, like you can see that I'm pointing on this little chart here. However, everything else is just waived, because as part of being a TOBY entrant, you've already provided that information, met those requirements. So all you have to do is confirm that you meet the prereqs. So it took me, you know, 30 minutes to pull that together, pay the fee, send it off. And then like a few weeks later, my building was BOMA 360, in addition to having won, you know, TOBY at the local and the regional. So it was great. But you can also do it the reverse way, where like, if you do go through the BOMA 360 process and have already compiled all of this information for all these other categories, you're already have set the groundwork to submit for TOBY as well.
So here's a list of the different categories. I think a lot of people are just naturally drawn to the square footage categories. And there are more than that. So what we generally coach people on is, if you can fit into a category that's not a square footage category, that is a better category for you to submit in. There's usually less competition in the other categories versus the square footage, because everybody falls into the square footage category in some way, shape, or form. So if you are struggling between 2 options, you're not sure if you qualify for one versus the other, like, please reach out to us. We'll happy to let you know which one you're a better fit for, or you're unsure of too. I'm really worried about the workbook that I submitted now. This is found, I don't think this is actually, this is found on the BOMA website, the BOMA International website. This basically is a description of all the different, like sort of a little breakdown of what each category requirements entail. Like if you were gonna qualify as a medical office building, you must have at least 75% medical use, and 50% of the dedicated medical use space must be for private physician or hospital employed physician offices. So these are the kind of requirements, like that is how you decide whether you're an MOB. If you want to do renovated, you need to have a certain, you know, number of projects or percentage of your building that's been renovated, those kind of requirements to go through. So this is a helpful guide for that. local process. So we have on here a link. Again, this is found on the Oakland East Bay website, and we can send this information out, I'm sure, right, Julie, to everybody afterwards that registered and participated. So essentially it's $470, well, it's $425 for local BOMA. And then there's an additional, did we verify this?
I think it's $50. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then there's a $50 one-time admin fee, which is what we pay BOMA International for the use of the online portal system, which if anybody had done this years ago locally, and some locals still do it, but I think we're trying to get away from it. They actually did physical binders of everything and would pass them around to judges. So now they've just simplified the process, made it all electronical so we can judge everybody online, upload everything, keep track of scores, no manually doing anything. So it prepares you essentially, the local process of uploading your information. See? It prepares you for the next level, for the regional and then the international, because that's how regional and international is judged. So it's a $475 fee essentially for local registration at each property. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think just one thing. So in our dates in the beginning, we talk about like registration being open starting today through the end of October. That really is just you indicating that you're going to sign up, that you want to enter this year. You're going to pay that $425 at that time to BOMA, and give us, you know, the details of your building, which category you're looking to enter into, or if you need some guidance on that. And then that December 18th date that we talked about earlier, that's when you need to submit your written submission to this online portal. I think that in the past we've had people a little confused about the registration period and the deadline for submitting, thinking that, you know, October 30th was the date that they needed to be done with their written submission. But if you know today that you want to enter, you should just go ahead and register today, get that out of the way, and then you can start compiling your information, schedule a coaching session, you know, whatever you need to do to prepare yourself. And then you essentially have, you know, a little less than 4 months to the deadline to submit your written submission and get everything in order. But that is a good bit of time. So
yeah,
the
I'm
portal.
worried about my I grabbed the wrong.
Oh, it's fine. It still has, yeah, it has all the information. So, and I have some notes as well. So I can talk on the TOBY portal if you want. So
yeah, you're better at that.
Sure. So, and then I know Glenn has quite a bit of experience using the TOBY portal as well from like an entrance perspective as well. So one thing that I would 100% recommend is that you type up your written submission in Word, save everything, you know, your attachments, your written portion, save everything locally on your computer, and then you can transfer it to the portal. It just, you know, it's easy. You can go back and reference it, make changes, update it. But so step one, once you've registered and decided that you're going to go through this process, would be to come here to the TOBY portal, which is just the website on the screen, toby.boma.org, and it will take you to this page. We also in the past have had some issues with entrants not having their accounts active with BOMA International and just having to resolve some login issues. So we also want you to tackle that early on so we can make sure that you have the access that you need now, instead of waiting until, you know, the day that it's due. And BOMA International is on the East Coast, so there is a time difference there where, you know, if you're telling us at 3 p.m. Pacific time that you can't get in, you know, you're really not going to resolve that until the next business day. So, but yeah, so you just go here to the portal, log in, and next slide.
Oh.
And then it takes you here where you'll click on Add Building tab to add your building here. It still has my name on it. So Glenn, this also, so there's a little duplication, but it is needed because, so when you register with your local BOMA and pay the $425 fee, we'll gather all the information, and then you'll come here to the TOBY portal where you will re-enter all of that information. Make sure that the person who's the point person for the process that you want us to contact, if we have any questions on clarifying what the building name is, asking for, originals of photographs and things like that, that contact information is accurate, because it will be used, from the beginning to the end of the TOBY process. So
I think it's also important, as Courtney alluded to use a Word document to capture your submission. And then when you transfer it or upload it, or whatever the jargon you want to use, to the portal, make sure you read it and it's appropriately spaced. As someone who's judged many buildings last year, I think I was in the international, I had 7. It's when you really think out how you write your submission and then space it in terms of paragraphs. Those buildings that do a very good job at that, you create a good impression for the judges, because the judges are reading a lot. And if your submission is well thought out and spaced appropriately, just give some thinking to that, because a lot of times when you take that and you dump it in there, there could be errors and things like that. I know it seems like it's a little thing, but dot the I's and cross the T's, think it out, so that a nice presentation is appropriately spaced and, has nice paragraphs, so there's a flow to it, so that when the judges are reading it, you have to think like the judge and say, am I making this as easy and comfortable for the judge to understand as I'm writing it. So I think that's important to remember.
Yes.
Okay, and then as far as the we're going to go through some of the categories here on the e-submission. The first category is your building standards. It's basically, it's your opening statement in a lot of ways for your e-submission, where you're giving basic information. There's a lot of information that the requirements have you entering for very few points. Yeah. However, it really is setting the stage of what your building's physical description, and so you have to figure, locally it's a little different. This year it'll be a little different because we're not doing quite the local judging the same way at all. However, people may have never visited your buildings, and you are essentially giving them a virtual tour with words and some pictures of your buildings. So when you're writing these things out and you're explaining things, do not assume that everybody knows the jargon that we use locally or that you use in your building to describe things. You really do have, like Glenn had said, you have to look at it like you're judging a building in a way, and reading the things. Is it clear to understand? Are you covering every little thing? Because me as a judge, when I'm going through this, I'm taking these standards while I'm judging online, and I'm checking off that all these requirements are met. These are requirements. They're not necessarily suggestions. They're actually what we're required as judges to look for, and you're required as an entrant to explain and touch on. So that's why I say this is like your Bible on everything. And so it's very clear, as you can see from this this slide on the building standards. It wants you to provide a building name, what's your square footage plates, what is office versus what is other, describe the exterior of the building, what's your ceiling heights, do you have restroom standard finishes? I know it seems a little cumbersome, and it's all information we all have as part of our marketing or our building standards, but they really want you to address everyone. And to Glenn's point about how you organize it, think about how you would want to read this stuff. as a judge, when you jumble all this into one paragraph for me, it's very challenging to read as a judge. So think about, you know, being a little more creative in your layout. Bullet points have been used, separate paragraphs for each thing, so that you really, I don't miss any information based on how you lay it out. I think it's, any other things?
No, I would definitely follow form with the entry requirements. Like if they're asking for information in a certain order, you should provide that information in that order, because again, as a judge, if you're judging multiple entries, like the more that those entries flow with the entry requirements, the easier for you as a judge it is to like confirm that they provided the requested information and potentially more than what was requested. And I know like Kelly talked a little bit about making sure that you describe things. And I always think that BART is a really good example of this. Don't tell me that your building is centrally located next to BART, because if I live in Oklahoma, I have no idea what BART is and I'm not looking it up. You know, I want to know that your building is centrally located next to BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit, that connects San Francisco to San Jose to Millbrae SFO Airport, like all of those things. Like you need to elaborate. And I feel like once you've elaborated once, you can then throughout the remainder of your submission refer to it as BART, you know. But it's good to kind of get that out of the way. And that's anytime also that you're going to use like an acronym, like you should explain what that acronym is, like put it in parentheses, and then that way going forward you can use it. Like SFO, for example, you can say San Francisco International Airport SFO, and then now you can, you know, it'll save you on character count if you're running out of space in your written submission, so that you don't have to use it just for filler there. Yeah.
And then on attachments, let's touch on attachments. This is a good one to touch on attachments, because there's a lot of attachments that they're saying that you can attach. I want to point out really quick, on the very bottom it says maximum of 2,000 words. So it's not even character count. They adjusted that a few years back, which actually allows you to write more. And then they tell you how many attachments you're allowed to have. On attachments, a really helpful thing is to, one, save them in the order that it has it on here, it helps. And additionally, if you name your attachments appropriately to match what the requirements are, it really helps us as judges know what we're looking at and where to give you credit for attachments.
I'll tell you, just to follow up on what, Kelly, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No.
Just to, when being a judge, you learn a lot. And I would encourage, if you're not a judge, contact Karen or Kelly or Courtney. We always need judges. You learn a lot. And a lot of times submissions or buildings, don't use all the attachments, meaning if they say you're allowed 8, sometimes buildings will put 6. You know, instead of 8. So if you're selling your building, you know, part of the process here is really to tell a story about your building and really convince the judges that you're the best of the best. So if if it's under community or tenant relations and it says you can have, I can't remember which, I haven't been in there, it's easy to forget, but if you're allowed 8 attachments, use the 8. Or if it's 7, use the 7. It only helps solidify and state your case even more.
Yeah, absolutely. Next. This one's pretty self-explanatory, competition photo. So the competition photos, these really need to highlight your building, because this is what BOMA International and is going to use for a lot of the marketing. If you make it there, it's what we're going to use locally as well to promote the buildings, to showcase the buildings. So make sure when you're taking, especially, I know this is a Karen thing, I remember this from years ago, especially when you're talking about exterior, you need to have a picture, and that's really probably more the award ceremony photograph more than anything, but your exterior picture really needs to highlight your building. A lot of times people do these far off aerials of their building and you have no idea what building you're looking at. They're great and they're beautiful, and I'm not saying you can't use them, but for your main picture of your exterior, make sure you have a picture that shows your building, and there's no question that we're looking at the right building for that, for sure. Anything else? Those are pretty self-explanatory. Okay, community impact. Oh, good. At least I have the right one that highlighted the changes. So anything that's highlighted in here are things that changed this year from BOMA or International due to COVID. Community impact. So basically, think of it as like community service. This is your community service. How has your building being where it is built, you being there as a manager, your company being there, all your tenants being there as tenants, benefited your community? We're talking about jobs provided. That one gets missed a lot in the requirements. Taxes get missed quite often in this requirement. One of the requirements is to talk about your tax impact. So how much do you guys pay every year to taxes? And are there any special assessments included in there that benefit any community, organizations? Like I actually don't know in San Francisco, but like Oakland has the business improvement tax. So everybody pays into this community bid fund that funds ambassadors and graffiti cleanup and beautifying the city. Like that counts. I mean, you have no choice in it, but your existence is benefiting your local community, and you should sell that as, something that you're contributing. Any sort of, and maybe, Glenn would probably be a really great person to talk about this because Glenn's pretty good at this. What are some of your community impact stuff, Glenn?
It's really a good point. And I just wanted to suggest too that also, or I think some people really do not really explore or really add to their submission is, don't be afraid to put something that your tenant does as well, as a part of that, as a part of the community. So if your tenant does a community related initiative with you in the building, whether maybe they sponsor a stair walk or a stair climb or, something for breast cancer. If you're connected with your tenants, include that too. If there's an outreach for the tenants, a lot of times that's a miss.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. To your point about including your tenants also, like I know for the corporate entity entrant, corporate, I can't remember the exact terminology, but if you choose to enter that category, that specifically it says anything that your tenants are doing, you can use as your own. And but for that one, it includes tenant relations as well. Whereas, for just the office categories, 100%, because your building exists and your tenant resides in your building and they are giving back to the community, that is, a benefit to the community and something that you should absolutely include in your entry, especially if, like, for example, a stair climb or something like that is opened up to other tenants in the building, even though it was like one tenant specifically that spearheaded the effort, but got everybody involved to give back to, American Lung Association or whomever was the beneficiary of that event. So.
Yeah. And with COVID, if you notice the little highlighted, basically the change is that because of COVID, you can go back the past 24 months to reference any community impact events or examples, letters from, organizations. I know, like when you do a blood drive, they give you a little letter of the American Red Cross a lot of times to include those letters. Include even like a tenant's email to you thanking you for your participation in something. Like, think like that, outside the box kind of stuff, not your just standard. I'm sure you'll find that you do more than you think when you really dig in. So, and the big thing, this is a very community impact, and our next slide is tenant relations. So I think it's, sometimes it gets a little confusing. I know, Courtney, you have a theory about this, because sometimes they overlap.
They do. Yeah. So I think that, oh, what was the example I used before? I can't remember, but like occasionally you can have something that has dual purposes where it benefits the community, but also, benefits your tenants, or is like a tenant relations event. Like I do think personally, I think that like blood drives is something that can cross that line because it benefits the community as a whole. But like a lot of tenants, you know, would have gone out and done that on their own, but you now as the property management team are providing this for everything. There's also, the other one, Julie mentioned BOMA toy drives, which is also a great one, which benefits the local fire, I believe goes to the fire department for San Francisco. And then there was one more I was thinking of. Oh, so like a flu shot clinic, for example, right? You are providing, a resource for your tenants to get a flu shot at the building. That is a benefit to them. That is a tenant relation effort if they're so interested or inclined. However, that 100% benefits the community as a whole because you are helping people gain access to, medical services that maybe they don't have the time to do in their personal time or whatever, that now you've just made it that much easier for them to do. And that's not offered at every building. So that is something to me that you should definitely or could definitely include in both community service or community impact and tenant relations. As an example, I'm sure there are more, I just can't.
So I think on this, the big change about, so the highlights, so obviously same thing with community impact. You can go back the past 24 months to reference this section versus the normal 12 months. And then they are asking for one more item that's going to be new for everybody this year is a description of how the building management's team communicated with its tenants during COVID, as well as 3 photos on how you fitted your building for COVID. So the signage, maybe your process, your signage,
hand sanitizer, yeah,
hand sanitizer, mat, whatever it is you guys did, taking pictures and including those as part of this. I know there was a question on the international call about the newsletter. Sometimes people get confused because nobody does newsletters actually traditionally like they used to. So it really is any form of communication you do on a regular basis to your tenants, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in newsletter form, but think about maybe you send out an email once a quarter, or you have a communication portal of some sort that you update to, provide current events for your tenants. Maybe it's even just your screens in your elevator that you communicate what events are on a regular basis. I mean, they're really just looking for how you communicate and keep your tenants up to date on a recurring basis, I think, more than anything.
Yeah.
I mean, other than that, we all do tenant events. Tenant amenities that you offer, don't forget about your bike parking, your showers, if you have a childcare facility, even if you don't run it, if you have a cafe, even if they're a tenant, those are still amenities, and they're brought in as amenities for the tenant ultimately. Yeah. Healthcare facilities, anything else? I mean, this is pretty.
Yeah, the work order system. I think also on here is the Kingsley surveys as well. One thing in my experience from judging that people kind of gloss over is the Kingsley surveys. They say, yeah, we do it every year. This was our score. But like, if you read the requirements here, it's asking you, to share your results and like what, and if you can quantify that you've seen like an improvement in your score over time, that's great as well. But also don't be afraid to like show a negative response, especially if you did something, kind of out of the box to address a tenant's concern or an issue. You want to like show that, nobody's happy all the time. I mean, we all have tenants. We all know that there's always at least one person that has something to complain about, even if it's completely out of your control. But what did you do to address it? Even if it's just hearing their concerns and doing your best to, be empathetic to their needs and stuff. So, but I would elaborate a lot there, because in my experience, I don't know if Glenn, you've experienced the same thing, but people tend to kind of gloss over that specific piece of this section. They focus more on all the amenities and not necessarily on that aspect of it.
Yeah, go ahead, Glenn, sorry.
One of the things that it says when a judge evaluates that or looks at that piece that Courtney referred to is, what was the action plan? So if there is a negative comment, which we all get challenging comments from our tenants, you know, it could be because, you know, whatever reason, it says to the judge there, and it says to the entrant, what did you do to mitigate that? What did you do to address that? What was the action plan? So I think that is very, very important, because if you can really say, hey, at the end of the day, they said that we didn't do a good job communicating when there was a shutdown of the elevators. Based upon that communication, our team did the following to address it, and we implemented it, and we followed up with the tenant, and the tenant was satisfied. Or what, you know, in something of that sort. Elaborate on that. Show some critical steps. Show some critical thinking. And it really shows a lot of initiative to the judge that you really read the submission, that you took the feedback seriously, and then you addressed it.
Yeah, and thank you. That is really all everybody's looking for. You're just looking to show that you read everything and you're following the guidelines. But let's just say you don't do Kingsley surveys. Maybe you have an owner that doesn't believe in them. It's not a thing that they do. If you have something that's in the requirements to talk about that you don't do, or it's not applicable to you, say that, address it. Because otherwise, as a judge, you're thinking they completely missed that. They missed some points because they say nothing about surveys, or they say nothing about their work order system. Or, you know, if you don't put it in because you don't have it, you need to say that you don't have it in a very eloquent way. You know, ownership does not currently participate in Kingsley surveys. That's all. I mean, it's as simple as that. And that's out of your control. It's nothing to do with you. It's not a reflection of you as a manager, but it is going to be a reflection of you if you don't talk about it. I think it's okay. Next, I thought, harder than it looks, just for the record. Energy conservation. So this is the Energy Star and the sliding scale that Glenn was talking about earlier based on your scores. I will tell you, as someone who's judged local, regional, and international, California does well on this. This really is never an issue. It's really more other states that really have a hard time with this energy conservation thing, especially. Why don't we
get a bonus on it?
we should, or yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot of local initiatives in California, requirements, city requirements already about efficiency and document it. So this is just, the biggest issue that people have with this is there's actually 4 different sort of sections in this. It's broken into for scoring. There's your Energy Star. And again, this is just your statement, and you can use within the past 24 months for your score total. It's not about being certified at all. But then after that, they talk about your education. So for the education, again, it's education that can be conducted virtually via online courses rather than in-house training and classroom training and staff meetings for this. So if you had it, talk about it. If you didn't, explain that and what the protocol is. Don't not talk about this just because you don't do it. I think this is really important. People just don't even mention it, and that's 4 points off right there. You don't even talk about it, that's 4 points gone. Same with building operations and maintenance is the next little subsection within this category. This is where you need to work with your engineer a lot to help you do this. And maybe your engineer doesn't write it, but you tweak his, he writes it and you rewrite it based on that, because engineers don't always speak, the same or write the same as you may write. as far as style goes and how you describe it, but you need to address every single one of these topics that are in this requirements, as far as your preventive maintenance program, how you document it, how you, monitor the performance, how you calibrate things and the sensors to maintain a certain amount of, maintain efficiencies in the buildings. And then it talks about your EMS system and how you utilize it to maintain efficiencies. I think this is the section where you can talk about actual measurable reductions if you did any projects as well, or put any systems in place that, provided, savings for you. You can transfer it into dollars per square foot or kilowatts per hour, or however you may have tracked it. So this is actually your engineers section in a lot of ways, and talking about the things that they're doing to help you become, be more efficient. Anything else?
No, I think we are running short on time, so I think we should hop to the next one.
Okay, so Courtney.
Sure. My lovely favorite section ever, environmental, regulatory, sustainability, and waste. This essentially is a section full of like policies and procedures and codes. In the past, as an entrant, what I've done and what I counsel people to do as entrants is, if they're asking you for something in here, like for example, in environment and regulatory, they say to talk about asbestos management, but say your building doesn't have asbestos, your company that you work for, whether you work direct for owner or for third party, probably has a policy and procedure on asbestos management and what you should be doing. And you can still reference that. You can say, my building was built in 2018, no known asbestos containing materials. However, if we were to encounter asbestos in the building at any time, our policy tells us that this is what we're going to do and how we're going to handle that. So just because you don't have something, you can kind of talk about addressing it here in this section. And I would just advise you just to talk about as much as possible. There's also some overlap in sustainability and waste, where waste is referenced in sustainability, and then it then has its own section. However, I would talk about it in both sections, because heaven forbid, judges are humans, we're subjective. Just because I judge one way doesn't mean every other judge judges that way. But, so I just like to make sure I check all my boxes and have the information available in every place that it's referenced in the requirements. So that way, if the judge reading it sees it, they see it everywhere that it's called out in the requirements, just to cover my bases. And again, waste is something, especially in the Bay Area, that we do really well, just because our local codes and regulations do call for us to do quite a bit of stuff. The rest of the country, I think some of them are just starting to recycle now. And as you know, we've been recycling, in the Bay Area since like at least the 80s, composting since, early 2000s. So these are things that are not commonplace in the rest of the country or even the world. So I think that it would be good to really highlight that. And then anytime that why we do something, like if you can reference the legislation or the ordinance or whatever that requires us to do certain things, that is called out for in this section as well, the environmental and regulatory section. So, like the Energy Star benchmarking is, I think it's like California Assembly Bill 802 or something, that says that any building over 50,000 square feet has to do that, and that's why we do it. And then I know in San Francisco, there's even, I can't remember, the Department of Environment or whatever it's called, requires the energy audits every 5 years or whatnot. So, those are things that you're doing simply as a result of being located in the state of California or in the city of San Francisco. And those are things that other parts of the country just aren't doing. So we should reference that and take advantage of all of the extra work we have to do just by living here. So, yeah, and just, there are a lot of missed opportunities here where people don't address everything, and just be, again, very careful of what's listed and what's requested, and providing as much information as possible.
I'm gonna keep going. Emergency preparedness. So due to COVID, they are saying you can use data up to 24 months prior for this requirement. I mean, this is just talking about your policies and procedures. So do know, like in the first bullet point, it says procedures and programs for life safety, fire, disaster, and security standards. Please address all of them too. Talk about any training you have, your tenant, fire floor warden trainings, how those are conducted, how often, drills that you do, any other additional training that you may offer for your tenants or programs. And training, I think it also talks about training for your property management, and your security. So I know a lot of security companies, for example, do additional training on procedures like this. If that's the case, you should be sharing that as well in your submission. If you don't have any of the, like an AED policy, if you don't have, I would address that you don't have it somewhere, so that when you don't have an attachment, it's not many people have an AED policy, honestly, is what's funny about this. But anyway.
Usually like tenant specific.
Yeah, that's my experience in it. Yeah, anything else on him? Sorry, I was reading that little thing. This one's let's see what else. Training. Oh yeah, see, this is my unfinished slideshow. Anyway, so again, this is saying that this would be training for building personnel in all other areas. You would document anything you did virtually for things. And I think that you probably could even go back further than the 12-month normal because of it as well, like what your standards are, maybe how you've done adjustments for training because of COVID.
Yeah.
List everything that you participate in BOMA, and all your staff members participate in BOMA, anything you guys go to, or if you're involved in committees, anybody, if they go to YP meeting or emerging professional meetings for your admin staff, any events you guys attend that support BOMA, and then any future plans of your staff to participate in training. Maybe there are plans for one of your assistant managers to start an RPA program. Yeah. Stuff like that. Is that the best way to?
Yeah, and I think on the future piece of it as well, people are asking you to talk about what your plans are for the future, and aim high, aim for the sky, because just because you say that's your plan you're not committing to doing it, but like
nobody's following up.
Yeah, nobody's like, hey, how'd your RPA course go, right? So like you can, if you personally, if you had the free time or whatever, wanted to take on something, this is your opportunity to talk about that. And when they do talk about, training that you've done as well, it doesn't just need to be BOMA. Like if you participate in CREW or in IREM or, if you sit on the board for a business improvement district, or anything that you are doing that is related to industry involvement, continuing education, professional development, anything along those lines. It could even be, just literally anything that you're doing to better yourself as a person or an employee, you could put in this section.
So this is my unfinished slide, apparently.
Sorry.
This reminds me of what to talk about. So what this slide should have said, and I thought it was done, is talking about the physical tour. So normally, pre-COVID, we would do a physical tour of the building. There's a scorecard. This year, because of COVID, we're making changes. So what will happen this year is that there will be a lead judge. Odds are it's going to be me, Courtney, or Glenn. Contact you, and we're going to set up either an in-person, just one of us, to come there to, there's a physical checklist we have to submit. That's part of the process of moving on. Well, part of the requirements for local, essentially, we have to verify you have these certain things. And then it would be something that needs to be used as you move on in the competition, regional and international. So we will schedule a time to come to do a physical inspection of the property. If that doesn't work for people, depending on what's going on in the world at the time, it may be a virtual thing that we have to set up with you to do a Zoom or FaceTime or something, you know, on that is really the process. I think that was the big change for us locally. And your scores, though, will be 100% off of your electronic submission.
So if you're competing against another building, you'll each be judged on your written submission on the TOBY portal. And whoever has the highest score based off that written submission will be the winner for that specific category. But we are required at the local, like she said, to do the physical inspection just to verify that you do have the requirements and you're not just saying that you do in your written submission. So yeah, we can, once people enter, we can talk a little bit more about that process as well.
And what those things that we want to see are.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. After you win local, the regional happens. We will schedule the one-on-one feedback sessions where we will sit down with you, review judges' comments on your scores, which will be made available to you on your local submission, and provide you feedback. And then you have an opportunity to update your online submission and submit it by the deadline, which, did we have the official date? Maybe, I can't remember. But we will give you the official date sometime in March when that'll be due for regional. There is a fee.
It's higher than this though.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, I think it's like $425
for regional now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
We'll get you an updated. We'll get you an updated fee. I thought that.
But it's not, you know, not a deal breaker. So.
It's what?
It's not a deal breaker. I mean, $50, $25. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then regional winners are announced mid-April, and you're automatically advanced to international. Nothing else can be done. No more changes to be made. Your best and final will be when you submit to regional. And then you just sit back, relax, hopefully, and maybe get a oh my gosh, look at my type. This is horrible. I'm so sorry. July 21st is the international conference in Boston. And if you haven't gone and you make it, I hope you guys.
Yeah.
And then you get to get all dressed up and fancy.
That's when we have the vaccine.
Yes, that's right. And again, with no picture of Glenn. So.
There he is.
Yeah, just take a screenshot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so that's it. Easy peasy, right? Does anybody have any questions? Well, I think we did a great job if nobody has any questions.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, please.
So I wanted to know, I definitely would be interested in a coaching session, but I also feel completely unprepared to submit for this year. Could I do a coaching session to help me get prepared to submit next year? Absolutely. Or do I have to do it closer to the time of submission?
Nope, absolutely. We can do one each year if you wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then another question is, all this information, like all the slides and stuff, I can find on BOMA International, or is it, where would I find like the in-depth descriptions and
the requirements? Yeah.
Yeah.
They're on the BOMA International TOBY website, but I think also BOMA OEB and BOMA San Francisco have them on their website as well.
Links to them. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you check out the chat section, I've been putting in some resources for you as you guys have been talking. There's a link to our BOMA Oakland East Bay Area TOBY page, and it has links to the international. If you click that link, it'll take you to our page, and it has, you can actually watch the international website, international webinar. We're going to be posting this webinar there. And then there's links to all of the TOBY information that have been updated and how to register.
If you have any questions, you can ask always.
I think it's really, really, you know, just to follow up on your question, you know, a lot of times people are in the same shoes that you're in terms of whether to submit or not. And it's really, you know, an opportunity for good feedback on, you know, some of the items, because, you know, one of the things I think is beneficial about those coaching sessions too is hopefully the coach is also honest, you know, because, you know, when you're applying, we want everybody to apply. We ever want to enter, but you're going against the best against the best. So what that means is, you know, you need to have your building in order, in tip-top shape, you know, striving in all these categories, and only because we don't want to see you discouraged. You know, you're going against, you know, to be involved in the TOBY process is really a high honor and really requires a lot. You can do it, but you should also understand that many of the competition buildings you're going against are achieving these various platforms or have been certified in these various platforms. And while it's not a requirement that you're LEED Platinum or LEED Gold or this and that and so forth, you know, it's an important benchmark as you continue to enter. I don't want that to discourage you, but if you're not ready to enter, also some of that frank and honest feedback is also helpful, because nobody wants you to enter and be discouraged and say, you know, I always enter and I lose, or, you know, things like that. No one wants that. We want you to enter and win, but it's also important for us to share with you some of the things that make winners successful.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, well, if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to any of us. And
our emails are on the website as well, I believe.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
You too.
Great day.
Bye-bye.